Well, I'm sitting here at Strumpshaw Tree Fair, and I have next to me the director, coordinator, or whatever she wants to call herself, of Weird and Wonderful Wood. But I have known Sarah for probably most of your life. The first time I met you, you weren't even speaking.
Because I was too young, or because I was in a bad mood as a child?
No. You were always a wonderful child.
I'll pay you later for that.
No, but your mum and dad have gone off. She is Tubby Dunford's daughter. We have to put that in somewhere. We have to establish that.
Yeah.
And she was with Bob at the time, and they'd gone off probably to one of Bob's gigs, and somewhere. Anyway, you had been abandoned. I mean, you'd been left in the charge of my mate Gaz and me, which was very brave of your parents, I think.
Well, neglect is the mother of resourcefulness.
Absolutely. It's so Gaz and I kept there, and we looked up. But then there had been various moments since. What's your earliest recollection?
Oh, I have memories of before I could speak. Not many, but I do have very. Do you mean of meeting you, or just? Yeah. Oh. I think I remember you being in the kitchen with the Arga going, and we were all huddled around the Arga because it was really cold.
That was in Weatherden.
That must have. It must have been Weatherden, I think. Yeah. Although there was an Arga in Bramford too.
Yeah, but I think the only time I went to Bramford was the babysitting.
Yeah, that must have been Weatherden. So we moved there when I was 5.
Yes.
So. Yeah, and it was a cold, drafty, crumbly old house, wasn't it?
It was indeed.
Huddled either around the open fire in the living room, where we all sat as close to it as we could possibly get, so the sparks burnt holes in all our clothes, or we sat in the Arga pretty much. I always open, and I still do it now. I walk into my mum's house and I open the Arga door and stand in it. Doesn't matter if it's sunny or hot. Midsummer, and I still do the same thing.
Yeah, so that would have been, and I think I was with Stereo Graffiti at that time, which was a poetry and music show, and I used to call in on the way home.
Yeah.
Targus was the sort of place where you called in as you were passing.
Oh yeah, everyone called in.
Everyone called in, and then and she was forever saying, "You want to come to the fairs, John?" So I eventually started going to fairs.
It must have been a little bit later, because I think I remember the Bungee Horse Fair, and I must have been 7 or 8, maybe.
Yeah.
And then the Barsham fairs came a little bit after that.
I think the first ones I was going to were the Burgolt and Ruffin fairs.
Yes, so that a little bit later. So what? 1980, something like that.
Yeah. And I would bring in, because I was managing Black Ivory.
Yes, I remember Black Ivory.
And then we did a sort of, there was a benefit for the Burgolt Fair or the Stout Valley, whatever they call it, with a grapevine or something.
Yeah.
And that was Essex University, I think, or something. And I put on Black Ivory, and I was on as a poet.
Yes.
And then it was kind of weird because they didn't like political poetry, because it was a time of, politics. You weren't supposed to speak about that kind of thing. It was a very weird.
It wasn't done in polite company, was it? You didn't do politics.
So I'm afraid I mentioned my aversion to the National Front, for instance, during the poems, and that was,
Yeah. Was that when all your neighbours hung Union Jacks outside their windows? Do you remember that when you lived it? I remember coming to your house once, and I think it was in the Jar Warrior days, Jar Warrior days. I'd met Rocky and Lloyd and those people, and your neighbours had hung Union Jacks outside the window, and Tanya, my Chinese friend, do you remember? She and I came to your house. We were young teenagers, 12 maybe. So maybe it was around that time, but I do remember that very well, and being utterly horrified and wanting to climb up drain pipes and rip them down.
Yes. So so that would be the after the Black Ivory broke up, and I had them booked for Burgold Fair.
Yeah.
And so I started managing Jar Warrior.
Yeah.
And so I took Warriors down there.
Yeah.
And Lloyd has talked about it in the interview with him that you know his dad came down, and he was really surprised by Nakedness. I think surprised him.
Yeah.
So, but everyone, I think it was probably the first time that most of those people had seen live reggae.
You said Nakedness, like everybody listening would understand what we're talking about, but there was always a naked man dancing through a fire, wasn't there? At every festival we went to.
Yes.
And topless women on motorbikes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was sort of that was the norm.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
So but I think that introduction to reggae, you know, live reggae, was quite kind of, because that was in the Dome, wasn't it?
It was
in Gill's Dome, and which was the main. The Dome was the main stage of those things.
Yeah.
And then of course we progressed to. Was it the kids' fair that we first sort of started producing stuff together, or was it the thing at the theatre?
I think it was around.
They were all around the same time.
It was around, it was sort of 1980. I would say that the European Theatre of War was 1984.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And maybe the kids' fair was 1985.
Right.
Yes, so it was all
around the
same time.
And it was you and it was Gwenda's daughter, wasn't it? One of Gwenda's daughters, Gwenda Clark's daughters.
Yeah.
And one other. There was three of you, wasn't there? Involved?
Yeah.
And
there was.
And you performed one of my poems, which I can't
Yeah.
remember. And you can remember a few lines.
I can remember.
Give us a few lines you can remember, and eventually it will come back to me.
You've got me now. I remembered a bit of it yesterday. Repeater, Parrot Mouth, dealing lead like one brought up in card tables and international policy making. There's an idiot or two out there. Oh, I had it yesterday. Can't remember that.
But that'll do. So, but I haven't the facts idea about this poem. But it was printed in where it was printed.
It was printed in the CND brochure for that year. They CND printed a brochure with various articles and poems and it was handed out. I remember all the gigs we did for the European Theatre of War, and I mean, I don't know how I got involved. That must have been you that involved us in that.
Me? Oh my God, this goes out there.
It was entirely your fault. But it was because Tanya and I had been coming to lots of gigs with you, and we were very young, and we'd go into all the gigs at the Manor Ballroom and things like that you were putting on, and we were really keen to do things, and we'd started dancing with a dance group called Jailbait. It was kind of,
You'd never get away with that now, would you?
I'm not sure how we got away with it then, honestly. And we were choreographed by a lady called Claire Parker, who was phenomenal. She was based in Norwich, and she was just absolutely fantastic. And so we were quite keen to dress up in sequins and latex and be on stage doing things. And the European Theatre of War was a little bit of a follow-on from that.
Yeah.
So, Yeah.
So I dragged you into that. Well, you didn't need dragging. I just said, "Do you want to do it?" And you went, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And then, well, it just we've mainly met each other at gigs since then, I think.
I guess so. Well, we've spent our lives, haven't we, bouncing from festival to festival every summer, and gigs throughout the winter times.
Yeah, and the stuff Tarby was putting on,
Yeah.
at the village hall and things.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
you were always, from the time you could crawl, you were always crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And slightly feral, but yeah, crew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then gradually you've I mean, before you took on Weird and Wonderful Woodie, you started taking on stages in other festivals.
Yes.
The Maui Wowie.
Yeah.
Was there's Maui Wowie is a lovely festival in Durham. It used to be in Leiston, near Leiston.
Right. Yeah.
And it's another sort of. There's all sorts of almost children of the fairs, doesn't there, happening in East Anglia?
Yeah.
They've all taken on a different aspect of the fair. I mean, Strumpshaws, people say, "Oh, this reminds me of the old Albion fairs."
Yes, it does.
And I mean, and especially because local people came, and that was come to this, and that was always a part of the old fairs. I mean, I remember old people in Belvedere Road in Ipswich coming up to me, and it was about 10 years since there'd been a fair, and they'd say, "When there's going to be another fair, John?"
Yeah.
And although it was crazy and hippie and sort of very experimental, I mean, and that was a lot to do with your mum. She was always looking for new stuff, and there were crazy people like Packa, and you never knew what he was going to do.
Oh, that just genius. I mean, there are some creative and performative geniuses, aren't there, that we've been so privileged to interact with over the years and see them progress, and their wonderful inventions. And I mean, it's just phenomenal. Packa's metal fire-breathing horse was just. It's a sight you can't forget ever. It's just,
and you can't describe.
No, you can't describe it. How can you describe a,
yes, and
8-foot fire-breathing metal horse that walks around? I mean, it's just bonkers.
Yeah, he. I mean, Packa actually made Archaeos look tame.
Absolutely, yeah. We went and did some work with Archaeos. I don't know how we did that. I don't know.
Archaeos was a French circus. That took it to the edge. I saw them up with the clowns, the show at Battersea Park Power Station, and you weren't allowed to sit in the front row because it was too dangerous to sit in the front row.
Yeah.
And there was always it was a huge cast, about 50 people.
Yeah.
And there was always one of them injured by
every single show.
Every show.
Every single show. But they were bungee jumping with chainsaws. They were leaping from the rigging at the top with live chainsaws, and there'd be like 10 of them bouncing up and down. And it was like, I mean, everyone in the audience was on the edges of their seats until they set off the firecrackers under the tiered seating, of course, where we all leapt up in a crazy Mexican wave going, "What on earth is that?" We saw them in Clapham Common. Mum and I went up to Clapham Common, and the show was shut down. It was their first night. They were supposed to be there, I think, for about 7, 8 nights or something, and they were shut down after the first show. And I don't know, Clapham Council came in and said, "Oh, you can't do that."
Yes, councils. Health and safety and Archaeos didn't actually go together as a concept.
No. I'm not sure health and safety and festivals went, or Albion fairs went together at all. There was no such thing as health and safety. I remember sort of climbing a tree to rig the witch that we were going to set fire to on a Halloween event when I was about 14, and it was the most ridiculously dangerous exercise. If I saw my daughter doing that, I'd have to run away and hide and not look at what she was doing, but nobody batted an eyelid ever.
No.
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, partly it's because in current terms, they were small.
Yeah.
You know, a few thousand people at a push.
Yeah.
And so it never raised, you know, it didn't, you know, there was no headlines, there was no, so it was, and it was very subtle, it was very East Anglian.
It was.
You know, it was, and that's why it didn't kind of, that's why the convoy didn't get it, for instance, because they were used to sort of claiming land. And being thrown off it, so it didn't matter what they did. And everything here was done in, you know, in conjunction with, negotiating with the farmers. You know, they'd have a site where a site would be full of stubble because it was they'd done the harvest and they were waiting before they ploughed it up for the next one. So there'd be like a 2-week window where we could have events. So it was always incredibly uncomfortable to camp because camping on stubble is not comfortable if you're sleeping on the floor.
No, I won't do it anymore. I haven't done it for about 20
I haven't,
years now.
Well, it's just one of those memories, memories. But it was like, so it was all what, they were very much part of the community, and it was alternative East Anglia, which, you know, I mean, which came about because of cheap housing up here. And
I think that's the thing, is that we borrow the land, we appreciate where we are, and it's about respect of the environment in which we live, which is why, you know, tomorrow morning Strumshaw will be tidied away and returned to its natural state without a dog end or a piece of litter in sight, and that's what we do.
And then it was like that at Hawley Park at the end of Weird and Wonderful, and it will be like even the sort of crazy babies at the fairs, like Maui. Because I still think of Maui as a baby. It's a continuation of that.
It's 10 years this year.
It's its 10th year. I remember the first one. I'd forgotten I was going to be on because Silas and I are both slightly random in our organisational skills. And he'd rung me up, and I'd probably written it in the diary, but I'd probably lost that diary. And we never, there was never an email or anything. It was very much like how Harvey used to organise things. And I went down to, I was in the Goldstone Locks. I was staying in my caravan up on Norfolk Broads. I went to Goldstone Locks, and Silas's mum had a leg in plaster. And so, and then she said, see you next weekend. And I said, why? And she said, you're on the poster. And I thought, well, I better turn up.
I'm sure you're not the only person that's ever done that.
No.
So, we have one guy that comes to Weird and Wonderful Wood, and I'm sure my mum had it when she was doing Weird and Wonderful. And we've inherited this, I mean, amazing, creative, wonderful guy. And he lives in a caravan in a field, but he doesn't have an address, and we have to go and find him or phone people up to go and knock on his door and say, Weird and Wonderful Woodie's then, please come. And he always says, yes, I'm coming. He has got a phone, but he rarely answers it. And but he forgets. So every year now I phone him a week ahead, and then I phone him a day ahead, because otherwise he's likely to forget again to come. And he turns up, and we never know if he's going to show up. Some years he shows up, some years he doesn't, because we've told him and then he's forgotten again. So, you know, but that's just the way it is, you know.
Yeah,
you're not the only one.
Well, I never thought I was particularly individual. But it's that. But it is that there's a kind of loose anarchy about it all, but it's all. But there's a very strict organisation underneath to make sure, like there's, you know, the tents are down, the ground is looked after, and everything else. So it's this. It's that balance of, you know, it's very agricultural, isn't it? You know, I mean, in terms of like a farmer, you know, you have a conversation with a farmer, and there's never any sense of urgency. But you know, the crop always gets planted, it's always harvested, and it's a very serious business. But you wouldn't think so by a conversation.
Yeah.
You know.
And people have to move sheep, for example, on if there's an event happening on a piece of land, they have to move the sheep, and the land has to be restored to its most pristine condition before sheep are allowed back on. If people camp on a piece of land, then sheep aren't allowed straight back on, for example. And it's about working together, isn't it? It's about, respecting, the animals that live on the land and the people that farm the land, and it's a cycle that which we're
so
all part of.
Here you've been running the dance tent, loosely described.
Loosely described as running.
Yeah. And loosely a dance tent, because it's had as much music as dancing.
It has. It's had quite a lot of dancing though, actually.
Yeah, it has.
It was
fantastic.
fantastic. The Polish dancers were just
I saw them. Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, the Egyptian dance and just been, and the klezmer dancing. It's just been lovely this weekend. Really lovely.
And you run a stage at Maui, don't you?
I do. Yeah.
Which is the Enrico Marx thing.
Yes. Yeah. Jeremiah Marx.
Jeremiah.
Very, very good friend.
Yeah.
Jeremiah, who's no longer with us.
But a legendary Rasta from Braintree.
Yeah.
And he was in the Observer. I remember the Observer, the colour supplement, did an article on the Rasta, and he was the Rasta they took, but he was originally in a reggae band called Invasion.
That's right.
And but then he worked non-stop as a musician. He'd be in 3 bands simultaneously.
He never stopped.
And held down a day job.
Yeah.
In the hospital.
Yeah.
So extraordinary character. And he was playing his first heart attack, he was playing a few days afterwards, because we went to see him down the steamboat.
That's right. Yeah, we did. And throughout his cancer treatment, he was performing. He was, in fact, a week before he died, I went to see him in the hospice where he was in Essex, and he basically performed to an audience. He was
a force of nature.
He was an absolute force of nature. Yeah, he was like, because he was, I don't know what, mid-60s, I guess, but he looked like a gleeful toddler.
Yeah.
Always looked like a gleeful toddler.
And really could work a crowd.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So the stage, the Jeremiah Mark stage, you do the Saturday, don't you?
I do the Friday and the Saturday.
Friday and the Saturday.
Yeah.
And and then is it the last 2 or 3 years you've been running Weird and Wonderful?
3 years, yes.
3 years.
Yeah. Mum had decided she was going to retire before things got shut down in the COVID years, which was a struggle for her to...
Oh God, yeah. I can remember her almost retiring.
Almost retiring. She did it for about 3 or 4 years. She almost retired, and she kept saying this is going to be the last year. And but she again, a force of nature, isn't she?
Yeah.
My mum. She just, I don't think she really wants to stop even now, because she's too full of it all in her head,
Yeah.
She's
We did. After she got her MBA, which she took it out when I was talking to her, and she said, "I'm not sure what I got this for." We had to read it to find out what she got it, and
for her contribution to the arts.
To the arts,
which is vast.
Huge,
huge.
So the and very much a contribution to East Anglian art.